This is an anime called Genocyber, and yes, it is a play on the other G word that I won't say because YouTube doesn't really like it, but pretty graphic depiction, right? But it gets even worse than what you see at surface level. See, there's this unspoken, unwritten rule in media entertainment that you don't off kids on screen. It's why you're probably going to have a hard time if you rack through your brain trying to remember times in movies or TV shows when it happens. It's why you can't damage the kid NPCs in Skyrim, and why NPC kid models just don't even exist in Grand Theft Auto. So if offing kids on screen is this taboo, unspoken rule in all media, then why did Genocyber do it here? Usually you can answer that with one of two things. Either one, to be really edgy and try way too hard to be cool, or two, to enhance their overall narrative. Genocyber is a look at if we existed in this more so technology cyberpunk-esque world and the Cold War happened, where everyone's really tense and on edge because they don't really know if the future is guaranteed, and we don't really know what's going to happen because we're having such this advance in weapons and technology with militaries and blah 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 blah. This isn't a video about Genocyber. If you want to know more about it, go watch it yourself. But I believe this scene in particular exists in Genocyber to more so paint the picture of, yeah, the world is kind of in a messed up state right now, and a great way to display that to you, the audience, is by, well, killing a kid. Or you could interpret it as, well, it's just an anime trying to be really edgy and stand out in the 90s. I don't know, man, it's up to you, bro. But that's today's topic, kind of, sort of. Ultraviolence and gore in anime. Let's talk about it. So back when I was 13 or 14 years old, I went through this phase that a lot of kids go through. No, not that phase. You're at the age now where you're no longer a little kid or a child enclosed in your own little bubble and perception of what the real world is. You're now a quote-unquote young adult, or at least that's what everyone's telling you, even though you have none of the perks or benefits of being an adult, and it kind of sucks. So you seek individuality, you start finding hobbies, getting into things you like and dislike just for those things to flip on their head and change every 5 to 10 months. This is when I got into my quote-unquote gore phase. In my own little twisted way to prove I was ready for the realities of the world, to prove I was becoming mature, I dove into this rabbit hole of disturbing movies and anime, which, looking back on it, that was really dumb, but I was like 14, bro, so relax. So with that, I've seen some really messed up and brutal stuff on the internet until one day I was finally like, yeah, no, this is just weird stuff. Like, this is genuinely doing something to my psyche, and I think it's negative, so I'm just gonna stop here. And I had a hard nose coming to realization about this a few days ago. There's this video that's going really viral. It's like the iceberg of disturbing movies or something like that by Wendigoon, and I watched that entire video and I was like, wow, I have seen like a lot of these movies. Like, I had seen maybe like 70% of the movies in that video, and like, that's a lot, but you're like, I mean, it's not all of them, right? But when you realize that there's like a small quarter of the stuff in that video that are just pure real snuff films and things like that, I was like, oh man, my parents did a terrible job censoring me from the internet, but that's neither here nor there anymore, because I'm an adult now, and yeah. But after a while, it just got to the point where I was like, yeah, all this body horror and super violent anime, this stuff isn't even entertaining anymore. It's just genuinely something that I'm watching, and I'm having this weird out-of-body experience. Like, what are you doing? This is not a productive use of time. What's happening? What are we doing right now? Just like, awaken. Let's go, bro. Like, what are we doing right now? I have become numb to all those shock videos and all those shock pictures, like Blue Waffle and 2 Girls 1 Cup. Like, I was just seeing it all. But honestly, I think it made me a better critic in a weird way. Like, everyone's probably thinking like, no, there's just no good thing that could have possibly came out of seeing all that weird shit, but no cap, I genuinely think it improved my viewpoint on storytelling and stuff like that, because it made me realize that using gore and all this high-paced action as a crutch for your movie or your anime or whatever is just cheap, lazy, and boring. It's honestly why I hate like 90% of horror movies, and I know I'm like an anime guy, but just let me go off on this tangent a little bit, alright? I feel like there are so many horror movies that come out every single year, and just dozens and dozens and dozens of them don't tell any story at all. They want you to come spend your money at a movie theater so they could come up and be like the #1 selling horror movie of the summer, da 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 da. And literally it's just 90 minutes of cheap thrills and jump scares, and the jump scares themselves aren't even scary. It's literally just the movie getting really loud, which if you didn't know, when you're born as a baby, you have 2 natural things that you're afraid of: heights and loud noises. So making someone sweat because you make a really loud noise happen doesn't mean you have a scary movie. It means congrats, you can prey on the one thing that all humans are naturally wired to be afraid of. But on the flip side, there are people who just love it and eat it up. There are people who love gory violence and love loud noises, and that's the reason that things like this keep getting interjected into anime and TV shows and movies, etc, etc. So I'm not gonna pretend like my opinion is the right opinion, because I mean that wouldn't be an opinion at that point, right? But no, my opinion's right. All jokes aside though, when there's like super nostalgic old heads who talk about anime and they're like, the golden age of anime is over, man, the 80s and 90s were so much better. And specifically here when we're talking about like battle, power, fantasy, shonen type of anime, they love to pull the whole card of like, yeah man, the fights were so much more violent back then. Like new age anime just don't have that grit to them. They don't really have those intense fight scenes from new generation shonen, which one is complete and utter bullshit. Here's a clip from Jujutsu Kaisen, the like most popular shonen right now. Yeah, this man just got his hand clean cut off, and then a few minutes after this, literally pulls his heart out of his chest. So the whole argument of like, oh, new age anime is so soft, like, no, that's just not true. You just want gore and you don't know where to find it. I don't think it's dimming down because the world has become so PC and so soft. I don't think that's why uber violence is maybe not as prominent in anime as it was back in the 90s. I genuinely think that series that are taking the time to produce quality stories and use quality writing are being pushed in the forefront, and you can't just get on top from being super violent and having all this action. In the Jujutsu Kaisen clip, he didn't get his hand cut off just for the sake of that happening. There was subtle storytelling in that moment. By the way, if you don't know what Jujutsu Kaisen is, it's like an anime, and like bad monsters, good people beat bad monsters. That's the basic rundown I can give you. If you're interested, then you should definitely go check it out. It's a good show. But in this moment, our main character here is greatly outmatched by what they call in the show them curses, and to show you how outmatched he is, he just gets his hand clean cut off. Because if you were in a situation where you needed to partake in some combat, I'm sure the thing or the person you were going to be competitive with, you wouldn't want them to just have the ability to take off your hand at any point in time. So the storytelling and the point of this is to display the giant power gap between one character and another. And I know that's not the most complicated thing in the world, and it's something you probably like, duh, but that's writing, that's a part of storytelling. While don't get me wrong, something like Genocyber isn't the worst thing in the world by any means. There's a reason that you didn't know what the hell that was in the beginning of the video. All that super violence can only get you so far. Yeah, sure, maybe you'll make a list of most violent anime ever of all time, blah blah blah, by like Mojo or CBR or something. You'll make one of those SEO type lists, but are you really gonna go down as like this classic piece of art because you showed a kid's head exploding? No, not necessarily. Something I see a lot of people point to when they want to point out how soft anime is now, and there's a lot of myths and the arguments and going back and forth about this, but they like to bring up Dragon Ball, particularly Dragon Ball Super. So maybe one day I'll make a video strictly highlighting the issues or non-issue, depending on what side of the argument you are, in Dragon Ball in more detail. But I get why people want blood and more brutality in Dragon Ball. It's because Toriyama is one of the best there is at using it to enhance his story. Here's some of the most violent Dragon Ball clips I could think of or just casually came across while making this video.
My own attack?
And here are some of the most violent Dragon Ball moments that I can think of that came out of Super.
How'd you do that?
Promise. I promise. I promise.
Now, I don't want to make it seem like I'm cherry picking Super or trying to make it look soft. Those are genuinely some of the more hardcore clips that I think are in the show. But if you're seeing this and you feel like I didn't do Super any justice, then leave some really violent moments in Super down in the comments below, whatever you do you. Now, it doesn't take a well-decorated Metacritic to see there are glaring differences between Super's take on violence and action and all the other Dragon Ball properties. Let's highlight the classic Tien versus Nappa fight. So boom, a person walks in and they see Nappa yoinking Tien's arm. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that, hey, that guy looks pretty mean. And that's the point. That's what Toriyama is trying to get across. Nappa is a part of a race of people who literally are wired to be violent and have a rich history of being destructive. Now, obviously, I'm not saying this moment can replace that giant exposition dump, but you guys get the point. It serves as greater seed planting to the bigger narrative at hand. That being said though, there's still plenty of other ways to get across that type of storytelling. You don't really need to use extreme versions of violence, especially in a show like Dragon Ball, but that's for a different video that I will do sometime in the future, probably, potentially, I don't know. Let's move on to the next anime though that has plenty of gore in Tokyo Ghoul. Now, Tokyo Ghoul is truly fascinating, from again the extreme levels of violence to animation studios, at least here in the Western adaptations, going out of their way to censor some of that stuff, to it just being outright butchered in the whatever Tokyo Ghoul re-type adaptation. Well, let's not even talk about that because I already did a video on that, you know what I'm saying, link in the description if you want to see that. But yeah, it's a series that revolves around the idea of human-like beings eating other humans. So as you can imagine, things kind of escalate here and there. There's multiple torture scenes, and yeah, Tokyo Ghoul is kind of rough. And I've seen a lot of people use this as a major critique of the show. They feel like, this is just mindless, mind-numbing action, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that they've only seen the anime and they don't really understand the purpose of Tokyo Ghoul, which I'm not going to get too much into, but a lot of people will be like, oh yeah man, it's just so gory for the sake of being gory. There's just a bunch of blood and fights and pointlessness, and it's like a 13-year-old edgelord's dream. And like, that's kind of true, but it's also not true at all. Let's take a look at one of those torture scenes, specifically the Kaneki Jason torture scene, or I guess Jason Kaneki torture scene, because Jason was the one doing the torturing. In the scene, Jason drugs Kaneki, then proceeds to cut off his fingers and toes as they grow back, and then force feeds him to make them grow back. And he does a weird thing with a centipede that I won't get into too much detail. And this doesn't happen in the anime, but it happens in the manga. He does something that I can't say on YouTube because YouTube doesn't like the word, but it starts with an R, and if you can't figure it out, just go look it up. But yeah, so this scene was kind of intense, and there are a lot of people who experience this scene or they read it in the manga and they feel like this scene, or at least the extent and the details that we're going into, weren't really necessary, and I could not disagree anymore. Now remember, earlier in the video I said I hate when you just use gore, when you use shock factor and body horror, etc., etc., as a crutch for your cheap whack-ass entertainment, but that's definitely not the case here. Jason does this to Kaneki to mentally break him, and even though at the end of it all he does, it doesn't end up too good for him, but he achieves his goal of kind of driving Kaneki insane. So now you're asking, well, Awaken, why would you respect it in this Tokyo Ghoul but not respect it in one of those weird disturbing films where it's just an hour's worth of them torturing a person? And the answer is simple. It mattered in the grand scheme of storytelling. It told the story of Kaneki and really kind of impacts Kaneki's mindset going forward into the next season, no matter how big of a mess that Route A thing was. It turns Kaneki really cold, and then he's the reason, like, you know, he's the face of like all the e-boys who have their hearts broken in high school on Twitter and shit. But it's understandable. You may not agree with how Kaneki acted or how Kaneki felt, but you have to at least understand it because it was a part of the story. You find hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases of people going through super traumatic events and they are never the same person mentally ever again. So Tokyo Ghoul treats this gore and this body horror in a more realistic way and kind of entwines it into the human element of understanding things. It's not just done to shock you or scare you or even necessarily make you feel bad for the character in this situation. It's done to give you a better understanding of the narrative at hand. And this is when I think Gore is at its peak. It's when Gore is at its best. Very fine line to walk when including super ultra heightened violence and super ultra heightened gore in your series, whether that be anime, movie, or whatever. But when done right, it's truly a thing of beauty. That's the end of the video. If you enjoyed that video, I make videos of this quality or better all the time. I got a few bangers in the work. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I usually have kind of like long-winded outros, but I don't today. So subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and leave a like and all that other fun stuff. I'm out.